Hey, it's Juck.
Hey, what's the best part about going 2-0? Jackson go 3-0. Oh, I hit that ball, let's get the ball. Never let that team get the ball. Hell, get no hit, so let all time for down. Woo! Hey, what's the best part about going 2-0? Jackson go 3-0. Oh, hit that ball, let's get the ball. Never let that team get the ball. Hell, get no hit, so let all time for down. Woo! Hey, what's the best part about going 2-0? Jackson go 3-0.
Let's get it. And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback. The truth is Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those. You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country.
That means we've got
The Juckonbucks on a Monday morning. Appreciate you all so much for joining me. I've been looking at the analytics lately, and it looks like we've got a whole lot of new people trying out the show. If you're new to the show, just came on during football season, welcome. I'm Juck. This is Juckonbucks. It's a college football show. I am a Buckeye, a very biased Buckeye indeed, but I think I'm pretty fair. And what a weekend of college football we had, especially for us Buckeye fans, as two of the top three fan bases in the country and programs in the country, some might say, Michigan and Notre Dame, both had a terrible weekend, which makes ours feel even better. Notre Dame and Michigan both entered the weekend ranked in the top 10 and both left the weekend looking for answers, man.
And figure out exactly, the mishaps occurred in the preparation.
But they don't need to look any further. I've got them. And they're not the only ones looking for answers. Two other Big Ten favorites, Oregon and Penn State, just barely squeaking out wins against G5 opponents. I mean, what's going on? Penn State shoots out of the gate week one, goes down to West Virginia, a pretty solid West Virginia team. They look fantastic. Drew Aller looks like a different guy. New offensive coordinator Andrew Kolenicki has him pushing the ball down the field, and Drew's right at home with it. Everything looks great. This week, they get Bowling Green. Bowling Green comes into town, the old Orange and Brown, the school that Paul Brown stole the colors from for the Cleveland Browns because he loved their uniforms so much at Bowling Green. And Bowling Green comes in as a 35-point underdog at Penn State. Bowling Green not only gave them a game, but they were winning the game heading into the fourth quarter, 24-20. Penn State ends up eking it out, winning by a touchdown. Drew Aller just 13 of 20 for 200 yards. He threw 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. We knew they were going to have issues at wide receiver. It's just not a very solid core. The Bowling Green wide receivers look quite a bit better than the Penn State ones. And the combination of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen running the ball, each for over 100 yards for Penn State, ultimately was the difference in the game. But man, I don't know how this has happened this weekend and why we're seeing so many of the top teams kind of struggle with such inferior competition. In the pregame show, I was talking with Chris, Ron, and TK O'Grady. TK is a Penn State fan, and he's not a James Franklin guy. He thinks it's time to move on. He's thought that for a while. There's been a whole lot of talk since the new playoff that Penn State is going to be the team who would have in the past 10 years, if you were using this 12-team format, benefited more than anybody else. They would have made it to 6 or so playoffs. But if you've never got the talent or the coach to beat the top tier guys, what does it really matter if you make it to the playoffs every year? And it looks like, again, we've got a Penn State team that's inconsistent. They're not even, right? When you got a wide receiver crew that's just that poor and you're giving up this many points to a Bowling Green team with a defense that's supposed to be the strength of your team, I just don't know, man. Maybe they're just trying to figure it out. Maybe it's growing pains. but they got a long way to go. Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, not so lucky. They didn't squeak out the win with their MAC opponent as Northern Illinois came into South Bend and beat the Fighting Irish. I haven't rooted so hard at the end of a non-Ohio State game in a long time. I mean, that one was really exciting in the fourth. We had some questionable ref calls, but Northern Illinois pulls it off. And just last week, everybody going on all week, Notre Dame hits top 5, right? They get to the top 5 after beating a Texas A&M team. For some reason, Notre Dame was the underdog heading into that game. 2.5-point dog. I don't know why Texas A&M was getting so much respect in Mike Elko's very first game, just because they have talent on the roster left over. But he was sure getting it. Notre Dame goes in, and they look maybe like the more talented team, and the narrative is that Marcus has flipped the roster. He's upgraded the talent from Brian Kelly, which he's done a really good job in recruiting. There's no excuse for this, man. You cannot do this. And Marcus seems to find a way to do this. He said after the game about the mystifying loss, we've been here before.
Gotta own it. We got to fix it. I've been here. We've been here before, right? We've been here before.
And yes, he has. This is a guy that's lost to Marshall. I think he lost to like a 1 or 2 win Stanford team as well. He's definitely been there before. Fans and administration will accept certain things, but they want to feel secure. They want to feel secure that their coach will not go out and lose a game like this to embarrass them to the rest of the country. Marcus seems to have a knack for getting that done. So I guess we look to the playoff now, and does this eliminate them? Does a one-loss Notre Dame team make the playoff? Usually, I would say yes, absolutely. But they came into this season already with an unbelievably weak schedule. The only team in the country that had 4 non-P4 schools on the schedule with 2 military academies and 2 MAC schools, the only one. They basically had to get through Texas A&M, Florida State, and USC. Well, they got through A&M. Florida State looks terrible. SC looking pretty good. But you lost at home to NIU. Should a team that loses to a MAC school at home even be considered for the playoffs? I think ultimately, if they win out, they're going to make the playoffs. And I hate that. That's what I hate about the 12-team playoff. I don't think that team should be able to compete for the national championship after a loss like that. I just don't. I can't get behind it. But they probably will. I don't think they'll get through the schedule, though. They got Louisville again. Louisville beat them last year. You know, they always seem to find a way to lose these games. It's just ridiculous. And Marcus Freeman, you know, it's karma. The dude's coming out talking about us, talking about Ohio State, the school that got him where he wants to be in his life and his career, and constantly throwing him under the bus. So, you know, what goes around comes around, Bubba. The former 10th ranked team in the country up there in Ann Arbor welcomed in the Texas Longhorns. 2 teams that were in the playoffs last year. One of them won the darn thing, and that was the team that came in ranked 10th. And the reason they came in ranked 10th is because they were 127th in returning production. That's out of 134 teams. And when you lose that kind of production, unless you recruit at the level of Alabama, really, I'd say almost exclusively just Alabama, when we're talking about that much production, to maintain a top 5, top 3 level, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible. That is like that's losing everything. And it was clear to everybody, the odds makers, the pollsters, all the fans around the nation, outside of the Mitten State, that when you compound that production loss with the loss of maybe 7 of your 10 countable coaches and your head coach, and you put in a rookie head coach, that you're going to drop off. Things aren't just going to keep on humming. But not the folks up there. They thought it was just going to keep on rolling as it was before. I don't know why. It's totally illogical. They bring in Sherrone Moore thinking he'd be able to continue with the Harbaugh blueprint. But he's a brand new coach. This guy's never done it before. He hired a staff for the first time in his career. Of course, it's not going to keep running like that. And that was on full on display against Texas. Texas absolutely destroyed them. They kind of just walked through the second half. I mean, that game was over at halftime. That Michigan team, not built to come from behind. It absolutely wasn't going to happen. And we watched the whole second half just kind of hoping at some point Texas would put in Arch Manning just to add a little insult to injury. Michigan was nowhere near ready for them. This team is an absolute shell of what it was last year in the last 3 years. But to be honest, this is what a Michigan team looks like. In the last 25 years, there's been a 3-year gap that was a blip on the radar. And the rest of the teams pretty much look like that one. An 8, 9, 10-win team. That's what a Michigan team looks like. I was told by them that Alex Orji was better than Will Howard all offseason. They were lied to about Alex Orji. They were lied to by the coaching staff. They were lied to by the fanboy media that covers that team. Alex Orji couldn't beat out Davis Warren. And Davis Warren couldn't beat out Julian Sayin or Devin Brown, and sure as hell couldn't beat out Will Howard. That guy's terrible. In fact, I was told their quarterback room was better than Ohio State's quarterback room. Not a chance. The only kid they got is the freshman. They got a freshman nowhere near ready because Jim Harbaugh clearly has a lapse in quarterback recruiting. There is no way that that should be the best you have to start a quarterback. No way. It's terrible. Superstar linebacker that came in from Maryland, the kid they told me was going to be the best linebacker in the Big Ten, Jay Sean Barham, transfers in from Maryland. Kid looks amazing in a uniform. Poor game his first game out. Then against Texas, their dead last defender in PFF. Donovan Edwards, the guy on the cover of the video game, somehow, after rushing for 500 yards last year, he is so boom or bust, man. More often bust than boom. Every once in a while, he'll take one, and he looks really good doing it. He looked like trash. But you know what was great? They've been telling us, look, we got this high-end talent. Yeah, the interior of the defensive line, it looked great. Will Johnson, he looked great. Colston Loveland, he got his numbers. And you still got Molly Whopped. Those 4 guys aren't doing it for you. And they've been banking on that this entire offseason, thinking it was just going to keep on rolling. A lot of comments on message boards all of a sudden, like Florida State, when they lost, very angry at their media for not telling them the truth about the team, apparently. You lied to us. You lied to us. Silence might have been better than whatever smoke was blowing up our keisters all off season. Would have been nice to know we were going to be this bad, expectations-wise. Some of them happy that Sharon Moore does not have his contract signed. Ready to get rid of him already. Admitting that the next couple of years are going to be very rough. I don't know how rough they're going to be. I think it's just going to be a regular Michigan team. 8, 9, 10 wins. That's what it is. I understand not being as good as last year, but this team shouldn't have ever looked like a doormat, especially at home. Now, I disagree. I don't know why you wouldn't see that. Now I see why the Giants let Wink go. That guy's terrible. But honestly, I don't know why you didn't see this coming. I don't know why they didn't see it coming. You lost everybody. To think it would be anything other than this would have been ridiculous. I just don't get it. But anyway, it's been a hell of a weekend watching those two lose. And we had a whole lot of other good games. Representing the Big Ten, the Nebraska Cornhuskers played their huge rivalry game against Colorado. And that game told a story. Matt Rule and Deion Sanders took over Nebraska and Colorado at the same time. Deion brought with him a couple of top 10 draft picks. Matt Rule, he went into a team that was much more talented to begin with than Colorado was. Deion tore it down, brought in, 70 transfers to make up his roster. They both played year one. Colorado gets the victory. They meet up again. Year two, Matt Rule continued to build on his program. Deion ripped the first one down after year one, ripped it all down, brought in 50 new transfers. And that's exactly what it looked like. Looked like Deion was starting over, and Matt Rule had a year built up. Dylan Raiola was good enough, the freshman quarterback for Nebraska, the number one quarterback in the country per some rankings. Julian Sayin was number one per others. And Dylan Raiola looks pretty doggone good. But the team, they look really solid, and they enter the top 25 at number 23 for the first time since 2019. So kudos to the Huskers. Another game of the week, Tennessee and NC State headed into Charlotte to play a neutral site game. Nico Iamaleava had a lot of people really excited to check him out for this one. I was excited. Didn't do so great. Didn't need to. Tennessee absolutely destroyed NC State, and they did it up front. And it is very clear that Josh Heupel has been recruiting very well on the lines of scrimmage. They absolutely look like a dominant force up front. They look like an elite team, and they are. And now they're in the top 10 as they come in the new AP poll ranked 7th, and they deserve it. And that now makes for a lot more interesting games on the schedule looking forward. We had some games. Okay, well, Georgia's going to play Tennessee. Alabama, of course, plays Tennessee. And those were kind of ho-hum games. Now, those are top 10 games and climbing with Tennessee. And if they can do that with Nico not even playing well, the games that he hits, this kid's going to be really good. He really is. He's got a ton of talent. He's humble. And he's the kid that came in and he had a huge NIL contract, the first big NIL contract. And because of that being attached to his name, he got some negative publicity. He's really an awesome young man, got the cross on his face, and he's just a very, very calm, mellow, humble sounding kind of guy. Heck of a talent. And what Josh Heupel's got going on right now, you can see why a certain lineman from Charlotte might have been attracted to it. We'll put it that way. I know a lot of Ohio State fans were very puzzled as to how someone could choose Tennessee over Ohio State, but you can see that they've got something really good going on down there. And they are now in the top 10 solidly. Hugh Freeze, who has been doing great on the recruiting trail at Auburn, running around trying to flip everybody's recruits successfully in many cases, needed to go steal himself a quarterback in the transfer portal because they welcomed in Cal and lost. And not just lost, but Cal was clearly the better football team. As Cal came into the Plains, embarrassed the Auburn Tigers, and Peyton Thorne was absolutely terrible. This game has some implications, and the way Auburn does this year does have some implications to Ohio State, as Naeem Offord, the superstar cornerback who lives in Alabama, has been spending a lot of time at Auburn. His dad came out last week and said it's a 3-horse race with Auburn, Oregon, and Ohio State. Ohio State still has the best relationship, as Naeem's relationship with Tim Walton is great. Nobody's going to beat that, and his dad, Kaori, came out and said that right off the rip. Nobody's going to beat that. But other things go into recruitment, right? Definitely the money comes in, and Auburn or Oregon will have a better package for him. There's no doubt about that. Proximity also comes in. Auburn's definitely got the proximity. But his dad said we're going to see how the season plays out. And what he meant by that was we're going to see how these programs look. And Auburn looks terrible. Oregon not looking so hot. We'll get to that. And Ohio State looking like an absolute killer. Kansas State barely went out and beat Tulane by 7 points. I expected more out of them, and I was really excited to see Avery Johnson. I've watched some Avery Johnson before. I thought that this year we're going to see a jump, and we still might. But as of now, man, you pushed Will Howard out when you got a pretty solid team around for this guy. He's a hell of an athlete, but I'm not seeing it so far. Definitely not seeing it so far. And drastically overrated at this point. Matt Campbell, Buckeye born and bred from Mount Union, the cradle of coaches, remains coach of the Iowa State Cyclones, beats the Iowa Hawkeyes for the Cy-Hawk Trophy, and that was an exciting game. I was pulling hard for Rocco Becht, the quarterback of Iowa State. I was yelling Rocco. My son was getting irritated. My youngest name is Rocco, so I kept yelling Rocco. It was fun, and Iowa State beats Iowa after the 40-point output that Iowa put up in their first game. I thought that we were going to see a little different Iowa, a little more offense, not so much against the Clones. I think the final was 20-19, and the Clones win. That is Matt Campbell's first time beating Iowa in that rivalry. So congrats to them. In my bet for Iowa over 7 wins for the season, Still looking like an absolute money bet, even with that loss. And of course, that does not affect them at all in the Big Ten race. And the way some of the other Big Ten contenders are looking, Iowa's still solidly in there. Last year, Alabama struggled against USF. It was the game that Jaden Milroe got pulled out of. This year, after one game under Kalen DeBoer, the first game of the season, everybody was really kind of crowning Alabama as, okay, they belong as the number 4 team in the country. Here we go into game 2. And while this game did end up being pretty lopsided, the final score, I think Alabama won by 26. This sucker was tied in the fourth quarter. So Alabama pumped the brakes a little bit. They've got some work to do, that's for sure. And next week, they head up to Wisconsin. That's a game that was on, I think it was in my top 10 most anticipated games of the year. Really looking forward to that one. Though I was hoping at this point we would see Wisconsin playing a little better. The 28-14 point win over Western Michigan now, after Ohio State played them and kind of saw a little bit more about that team, that 28-14 game against them does not look really good. Doesn't bode well for Wisconsin's chances against Bama. And that sucks. I was hoping that they were going to get things clicking, and that was going to be a really exciting game, watching the king of the SEC come up north to play a team. But that's all right. We'll have a home and home with Alabama and Georgia coming up here pretty soon. In fact, let's see, when is that? Here are the Buckeye big games schedule for 25, 26, 27, 28. And you can see that we've got Texas at home, then Texas away in 25, 26, 27 and 28. We've got Alabama at home in 27. Then we go to Alabama in 28. So they're going to come up and play the Kings of the North in 2027. That'll be fun. And we've got Georgia scheduled for a home and home in 30 and 31. So absolutely love that. Kudos to those athletic departments for putting those big matchups together. Everybody wants to see that. And hopefully the committee does their job and rewards those big time out of conference games being played early in the season by not penalizing them too much, unless you get blown out. That's a different story. Let's say, for instance, LSU, who lost to USC. By the way, LSU in a game against Nichols this Saturday. So another kind of big time team in a big time game against a crappy opponent. And we had so many of them this weekend. It was so much fun. But the committee has to look at that game. If LSU is in position to make the playoffs, they lost that out of conference game to USC early on in the year, but it was a close game. They challenged themselves. They entertained all of college football, and we want to encourage more of those games. So if you're looking at them and comparing them to somebody else, it's got to go into account. Yes, it's a loss, but it's a loss to what we think will be, we'll just say hypothetically, was a quality team. And they took a shot out of conference on top of their conference schedule to go play another quality team. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm hoping that there is a position that the committee gets put in this year where you see a situation like that, and they have the opportunity to show how they're going to react to situations like this, because they absolutely need to set the precedent that you are going to be rewarded if you lose those out of conference games that you schedule. If they're close, if you get blown out, all bets are off. But if you go and you play a banger and you entertain all of college football, we're going to reward you. Because if we can see more of those scheduled, it's going to be great for all of us. All right, so week 1, Oregon comes into the week ranked number 3. They come in ranked number 3, and they play a really tight game against the Idaho Vandals. This week, they take on another team from Idaho, as Boise State came in on Saturday. Now, Boise was 3-0 all time against Oregon, which is just pretty wild, right? This game was so tight. It was on Peacock. I ordered Peacock. I thought that I had it from last year and never canceled it. Apparently, my wife canceled it. So I had to reorder Peacock to watch this game. Happy that I did, because it was a banger, went all the way to the end, and Oregon needed 2 special teams touchdowns to win that game. They won the game 37-34, and they needed those 2 special teams touchdowns. Awesome special teams touchdowns, but they absolutely needed them. If they don't get them, they don't win. And I don't know how they expect to stop Quinshawn and Travion, because they can't stop the run. Ashton Junty absolutely had his way with them. 7.7 yards a carry, rushed for 192, 3 touchdowns. The Buckeyes trip to Autzen Stadium now feels a whole lot different than it did before to me. When you look at these guys in their first 2 games, they're discombobulated. They can't stop the run. Dan Lanning doesn't look nearly as confident as he did in his post-game pressers. Things look a little different, and they have now fallen to number 9 from 3-9 with 2 wins, but two wins that just don't inspire a lot of confidence. I'm surprised that the AP has dropped them like that, but at the same time, I think that's how it should be early. I like the way they're moving teams like that early. Obviously, the AP poll means absolutely nothing right now, but it did come out. Texas has jumped the Buckeyes, and who could argue with it? If you're just going by what have you done so far, yes, Texas should be up there. Georgia beat a good Clemson team. Clemson came out and really did their man this week. So Georgia beats a good Clemson team. They're number 1. Texas beats the top 10 team in the country at the time they played them. They're number 2. Ohio State, not played a good team yet. They're number 3. Looked absolutely great doing it, but they're number 3 solidly. And rounding out the top 10, you've got number 4, Alabama, number 5, Ole Miss. They had a good game. Number 6, Missouri, number 7, Tennessee, number 8, Penn State, number 9, Oregon, and number 10, entering into the top 10, Miami. And I had somebody say to me last week, they can see the twinkle in my eye when I talk about Miami because I'm such a closet Miami fan. I hate Miami and USC more than anyone outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan. The reason you may see the twinkle in my eye is because when I first started this channel, one of the early things I did was made a prediction video about Miami making the playoffs and got so much vitriol, and it was nasty and rude and mean. And it's kind of like a, I told you so twinkle in my eye, not a I'm excited about Miami twinkle in my eye. I assure you that. In fact, I titled the video Our Worst Nightmare, Miami being good again. And, you know, they're really good. But Miami, Tennessee, and Nebraska now in the top 25, it feels like 1998. Ohio State, still good. All these other guys got these dips where they go away and they come back up. Not the Buckeyes. But let's talk about the Buckeyes now enter a bye week and an open week. You know, the thing is, I don't know what the difference between a bye week or an open week is. I'm sure somebody will tell me in the comments. But when the team doesn't play, I just call it a bye. And I also call it a 2-minute warning, which they've made very, very clear we are not to call it the 2-minute warning. They want it to be called the 2-minute timeout. I'm sorry. It's just a 2-minute warning in my head. I will continue to call it that. But the Buckeyes, to me, execution-wise, played one of the best halves of football we've seen since maybe 2022 Michigan State. And I don't mean they came out and just mashed a MAC team. They're supposed to do that. They all should be physically more talented than the guy across from them. But it was the execution, the lack of mental mistakes, the juice that they came out with. It was all of that. That's the stuff I'm really excited about. You build. It's difficult to perform as well as they did with so few mental errors in practice, let alone in a game. So, you know, I know sometimes I get post game number 1. Juck, you're overreacting. You're being too harsh on the offensive line. Post game number 2, Juck, you're overreacting. You're being too excited about this team of the opponent sucked. So, like, you catch me 5 minutes after the game, I'm going to overreact one way or the other. I can almost guarantee you that. But my point was not that these guys beat up on an inferior opponent, but that the execution was so good. And it was. And we're going to talk about some of the standout performers. But every week after the game, guys, by the way, literally as soon as the game is over, I come on live and we do our post-game show. I usually have one guest pop in and join me. And then I also have Dylan Davis after the press conference. Dylan Davis from the Delaware Gazette. He goes to the press conference, asks his question, and then he comes on and joins us and tells us how the press conference went. So if you are still hyped up, you want to see what other Buckeye fans feel like, I pull up a lot of different quotes and comments from the folks in the chat and discuss what everybody's got to think about the game. So join us for the post-game show. It's a whole lot of fun. But the defense pitches a shutout, held Western under 100 yards, not rushing or receiving total, under 100 total yards, 99 to be exact, which I think is so cool. But the true Buckeye fan knows that what is really going to hold this team back, if something does, is the offensive line. And we all love the sexy, flashy stats, what the receivers did, what the backs did. It was awesome to see. Will Howard was great to see, and we'll talk about it all. But the offensive line, if something holds us back, that's going to be it. And we wanted to see this team start with some juice and some fire. And they came out finally with some juice. Ryan Day pulled him to the side right before they went out. The offense got him really riled up. He did the mosh pit thing with them. That's how serious he was about wanting to see some juice. He did the mosh pit thing with them, where he gets in the middle and has them, they push him back and forth. It looks ridiculous outside looking in, but it seems to work for the fellas. And if it works, so be it. I don't think he's done it since the game last year. And I don't know how many times he did it last year, but to pull this out for a MAC game shows you how much he wanted to see that juice. And it worked. These guys played with so few mistakes, so few missed assignments, that it was just exciting. I kept waiting for it to come. It never did. The offensive line was so doggone good. Josh Fryar came out in week 2 and looked like the guy we were hoping to see in week 1. This is the guy who was working his butt off, improving, looking better athletically. He was that guy on Saturday against Western Michigan, and the numbers back it up as well. The number one PFF graded lineman on the team on Saturday. The week before against Akron, he was dead last. This week he comes back, he's number 1. Best run blocker, second best pass blocker. Most well-rounded guy on the line. We could see the athletic improvement. He wasn't just mashing the guy in front of him. He was getting out on his horse, going and making blocks downfield. He was a strength of the team Saturday night, a strength of that unit. And as a unit, they played great. Donovan Jackson sat out again at left guard, giving Austin Sierreveld his second start of his career, and also giving Donovan Jackson, now with the bye or the open week, 2 weeks more to rest that hamstring, which is great. You didn't need him. Let him sit and heal. Perfect. Austin in his second start looked even better than he did in his first, and he had a pretty solid first start. Opposite him, Tegra also making his second start at right guard, and he played doggone well too. Josh Simmons played really well as usual, and Seth McGloughlin, after watching him at 2 games at center for us, I think Seth McGloughlin is a star. I had no idea that this is the type of guy we were getting when he came in from Alabama. He had made all SEC 2 years ago, not last year. Last year we had the snap thing, and that's all we heard about when he came. And I thought, all right, cool. It's another body. Maybe he starts, maybe he doesn't. But he's got experience, so that's good. This guy's fun to watch. He's great at double teams. He's great at getting to the second level. He's really good when he's pulling. He's crafty. The guy's just flat out good. So a big check plus for Justin Fry's unit on Saturday. And apparently the boss thinks he needs it. More on that later. We might wait to get into that tomorrow, but we had basically employee reviews for the coaches. And those were all made public via a Freedom of Information Act request. So we'll go over those probably tomorrow. But let's stick with the rest of the offense. So Will Howard, tremendous at what he does well. Running those RPOs, it looked perfect all night. The shorter and intermediate routes, he looked really good. His leadership and command of the offense, very apparent. He decided to keep it that one time and ran it in for the touchdown. Looked great doing that. This was the best of Will Howard right there. We saw it. And this offense can absolutely hum when Will Howard is doing that. If that's the standard we're going to be getting, like, we're in for a great season. And what we saw right there, that's kind of the bar, right? That's what we're going to be measuring it against, because we've now seen what they want this offense to look at when it's running its best. I think Will was 18 for 26, 292 yards, adjusted completion percentage of 75%. His average depth of target was 9.7, which is 2 yards further down the field than the first game. And when Will came in here, there was a case being made that he was going to be much better than he was at Kansas State based on the talent around him. It's absolutely not just true, but it looks like a totally different approach. This is not how he played at Kansas State. This is a totally different approach. He's just a facilitator. He's the point guard. He's doing it so good. And they're going to put up all the points necessary to beat anybody just like that. The running game, we got to see what we've been waiting for with the two of the top 4 running backs in the game, I'd say, playing together on one team, both popping off. They looked fantastic. The offensive line made them look great. But to be fair, I think an average running back could have looked great with some of the holes that offensive line was blowing open. James Peoples looked like an absolute stud as well. Quinshawn, Travion, and James Peoples each got 9, 9, and 10 carries. Quinn led the way with 108 yards, 12 yards a pop, and 2 touchdowns. Should have been 3, but he got that long one called back. Trayshawn had 10 carries for 60. Travion had 10. How many times have you guys done that? I've done it quite a few. 10 carries for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jimmy the Peoples had 10 for 51. And fellow freshman Sam Williams-Dixon got himself 3 carries for 40 yards. It was fun to watch. It was so fun to watch. The receivers, 12 different people caught balls. So that's great. Will getting everybody involved. And one of my biggest questions was, will they continue to look like they're trying to run the passing game through JJ? Is JJ the focal point of the passing game? He absolutely was game 1. He definitely was again game 2, which I really, really love. He had 6 targets by halftime, same as game 1. And that's tremendous. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Don't waste this guy for a game. Don't waste him. You got him for 3 years. Put him right there. Look, you're number 1. Let's do it. And he's such a weapon. 70-yard touchdown right off the rip. He caught that ball maybe 3 yards downfield. There were 3 guys within a couple yards. Turns and absolutely smokes him. And we saw earlier in the day, Texas freshman Ryan Wingo get caught from behind. A lot of the Texas folks think Ryan Wingo is better than JJ. Nobody was catching JJ. JJ's listed at 6'3", 215, which is what he was listed at in the spring early on. I feel like he's gotten bigger. I think he's probably more like 222 by now. But to move like that at his size, it's just awesome. And I talked to Dylan post-show. Dylan brought up Chris Carter being on notice about all his freshman receiving records. I don't think it'll be close. JJ already with 3 touchdowns for 1. Chris Carter's freshman record is 8 touchdowns. We're 2 games in, he's got 3. So yeah, those records are all coming down, and he's going to put him so far out of reach it'll never be touched. Emeka also had 6 targets in the first half, and he continues to show just how reliable he is. He is so reliable. 5 receptions in the game for 98 yards, and along with Will, that little RPO game between the two of them, Emeka's the perfect guy for that. It was like a guaranteed 10 to 15 yards every time Will decided to throw it out to him. Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes, both caught 3 balls for 45 yards. Everybody loves to see Brandon Innes get some catches, get involved. He didn't get to get much run or much fun returning punts this week. And, that's by design. But got to catch a couple balls. And one thing that really sticks out about these 4 guys when we talk about JJ, Emeka, Brandon Innes, and Carnell Tate is the downfield blocking. We saw several instances of some really good downfield blocks, springing some runs. And this is an area that we all know needed improvement. It needed to be embraced by these guys. And they did. It really looks like they did. And when we look at these guys just physically, these guys can all just absolutely overpower any DB. Like these are big, strong dudes. And they're mean. They're mean out there. Even Carnell, who's a little on the slimmer side, he is great We saw him early on in the game laying out, putting down blocks downfield. He really has embraced it. And I love to see these guys doing that. There is a real team mentality going on with this team. I mean, it's a very selfless mentality, and it's what you need when you got this many stars. However they've gone about getting this to be embraced, it certainly seems like they've done it from the outside looking in. Tight ends, we saw the very first touchdown, 4 tight ends across the front of the line with Jelani, G, Bennett Christian, and Will Kazmarek. Trey in the backfield with Will, and they scored, but that was a chip all the way in his bag with that one right there. Jelani Thurman. This is a guy who has what it takes to be a potential monster, a difference maker at the position. We heard Ryan Day a couple weeks ago call him out publicly about his consistency, what he needs to see from him to get out on the field. And Ryan Day has been slow to play younger guys. We've talked about it ad nauseum, and it sounded heading into this season like Jelani Thurman. What we all really wanted was to see him, do what it needed done for Ryan Day to feel comfortable with him playing him more, right? And it wasn't there yet. And that was clear from what Ryan Day was saying. But what Ryan Day has done with playing time has not matched with what he was saying about him, because he's played in the Akron game just 1 snap less than Will Kazmarek and G Scott. And then this game against Western Michigan, Jelani Thurman led tight ends in snaps, 25 for Jelani, then 24 for the two of them, or 24 for G, 22 for Will. So Jelani led in snaps, which was amazing. And what do we need to see from Jelani? We need to see better blocking. What if I told you that Jelani Thurman was not just the best blocker of the tight ends on run blocks, but the best on the team per PFF? It's true. Jelani scored 83, which absolutely destroyed G, who scored 59, and Kaz, who scored 58. Now, PFF, not the be-all, end-all, and it's not a statistic. It's somebody else's grade. But it's a pretty safe assumption when you're talking from 83 to 59 and 58 that that gap is probably, you can swing it 10 points one way or the other. Jelani still not only hung with those guys, but had a better performance than those guys when it comes to run blocking. That is tremendous to hear. So we got that to go along with him getting more snaps, and Jelani seems to be coming along. Now, he did drop one ball. I know the ball wasn't perfect. I felt like he mistimed his jump. He was kind of on his way down when the ball came to him. I expect Jelani Thurman to catch that. That's just the type of athlete he is. And I think next time he will. But really exciting, because that's a guy that presents, when you get into those big time games, a mismatch. He's a straight up mismatch. He presents something, another complication for the defense to deal with that none of those other guys present. And Ryan Day this year talked about his different philosophy, but he didn't really elaborate. But it's playing young guys and playing more depth. And they've been doing it in week 1 and week 2. We look at Jelani, Aaron Scott. Aaron Scott played really, really good in the secondary. Last year, Jermaine Matthews, he played a ton tonight. It was, great that he got all that playing time last year, because when he comes in and plays a ton on Saturday in Denzel's spot, when he gets kicked out on the most ridiculous targeting penalty I've ever seen, he's ready to go. James Peoples playing early. Obviously, JJ. They've decided to run their passing game through JJ as a freshman. So we've got a different philosophy here, and it's working. It's looking great. We'll see what it looks like when they get into tougher competition. But I think this is a 100% welcome change, and I think it's great. So as we go through, tight ends looked very good. Offensive line looked very good. Quarterback looked very good. Wide receivers, very good. The offense looked really good. Man. Everybody was great against Western Michigan, of course, is the caveat. They told us Western Michigan was a step up from Akron. Not so sure I believe that. I think that Akron team is going to end up, as we go on through the season, being the better team out of those two teams in the MAC. And we'll see how that goes. But heck of a game by our Buckeyes. Tomorrow we'll go through defense as we're pushing an hour here. And we'll go through the defensive performers. But the Juckeyes of the day, of the week, of the game were Josh Fryar on the offense for being the highest graded offensive lineman after having a not so great week, being the lowest graded last week. Josh Fryar, offensive Juckeye of the week. Defense, Jack Sawyer for finally getting that sack that he should have got at Akron. He was so close. He gets the sack, but not only the sack, he had 6 pressures, and I think the next highest guy on the team was 2. So absolutely a difference maker and really showing it out there in game 1 and 2. Jack just looks tremendous. He is he's somebody you got a game plan for. So kudos to those guys. Great job by the Buckeye coaching staff. And now we've got a week to talk crap about everybody else, and that's going to be a whole lot of fun. So join me tomorrow. Wait a minute, guys, before I go, I've got to tell you about Columbus Apparel Co. Of course, Columbus Apparel Co. is my sponsor. Great folks. And what you can do at Columbus Apparel Co., one, is find yourself a shiny new Juckonbucks shirt, if that's something you're interested in, which, boy, one of these models we got to order some more of. The one on the bottom left, damn near sold out. Those are really popular. But aside from that, you can get screen printing done there. Any kind of shirts you want, family reunion, business, whatever you like to do. You need some shirts to go along with it. You want to look professional and proper. You want to deal with Columbus Apparel Co. Tom and Beth, they'll take care of you over there. You get real old-fashioned service. Folks who care, who are going to make sure you're not going to order the wrong shirt with the wrong type of ink, that you're going to get a good finished product when it all is said and done. And you've got just one shot to get it right with screen printing. So deal with people that care. It might take you an extra 5 minutes, but it's 5 minutes definitely are well worth it. So check them out at columbusapparelco.com and check me out tomorrow at Juckonbucks, where we will talk some more college football and have a whole lot more fun. All right. Talk to you guys then.